Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Fire can warm or consume. Water can quench or drown. Wind can caress or cut. And so it is with human relationships. We can both create and destroy, nurture and terrorize, traumatize and heal each other. Those are the words from Dr. Bruce Perry, a psychiatrist and co-author with Oprah, Queen O, and their book, What Happened to You? Today, this episode, we'll be taking a dive into his work, into trauma. So welcome. Welcome, my sweet codependent dummy. Welcome to episode 91 of the Codependent Dummy podcast. This is your girl, Marissa. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, podcaster, a fellow codependent dummy on my healing journey towards becoming a codependent diamond. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time to consume this content that makes you think, makes you feel, makes you think and feel and be more critical, more conscious, and give yourself some more context to yourself and your life. The title of this episode depicts 3 types of trauma. So we're going to talk about big T trauma, so trauma with a capital T, little t trauma, trauma with a lowercase t, and this actually isn't in the scientific literature, but I put trauma, and that is my way of representing complex or chronic trauma, also known as C trauma. I will be defining what trauma is, expanding on these 3 types of trauma, because I think there's actually more, but we'll start with these big 3 umbrellas. I'm going to share an anecdote of a little t trauma incident from my life to help with your understanding, and end with some questions for you to reflect on big T, little t, and trauma in your life and how it impacts your codependency. So I encourage you to see this episode as a Trauma 101 lesson. This discussing trauma is heavy. Shit's heavy. So before diving in, let's check in. And also, while you're listening to the episode, I'm going to talk about different types of trauma, and I may bring up traumatic memories from your own past. So I encourage you to listen with intention, listen with compassion, and if and when needed, give yourself some space to process the episode, bring it up in therapy, reach out to me, and just Again, the theme of this year is tenderness. So be sensitive to your pain, be soft, be gentle before, during, and after listening to this episode. So let's check in. Let's stretch. Oh, stretch your arms. I got my arms up above my head. Oh man. You can grab your hands behind your back. Oh man, do you hear my shoulder pop? And just stretch, stretch, stretch. And let's do some neck circles. See, I don't know if my neck will crack today. Come on, neck crack. No, no cracking. Maybe I cracked it earlier. Some shoulder rolls backwards. Some shoulder rolls forward. Just kind of shimmy. If you're sitting down, shimmy your shoulders and your rib cage, your waist. Kind of shake out your hands. Shake, 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 shake. Shake out your fingers. Wiggle, wiggle your fingers. And tilt your head back and forth. Say yes with your head nodding. No, just say no. No with your head nod. A little grounding with your body. Let's take a deep breath. Deep breath in. And out. Just getting grounded, tapping in, tuning into our bodies. And I'm curious, how are you feeling? How are you feeling, my sweet, precious codependent? What's been the general mood? What's been your mood overall this week? It might have been up and down and all around, but overall, is there a mood? I feel like my mood this week overall was chill. Last weekend was not chill. So taking care of myself this week, continuing to take it easy. I was still wrapping up with my period. So chill mood overall, calm, thankfully. And yeah, curious what your overall mood was. I'm curious if there are any big girl tasks that you need to do and they're not getting done. Are you avoiding them? Are you procrastinating? Can you practice compassion towards yourself for not having gotten them done? And maybe take one step today, or set a deadline to take care of it by the end of the week. I have to do some bank stuff. I haven't done any. So I do have some time today to try and do accounting on or around the first of the month. So I sense I will crack that open today. And hopefully, I think I can get that done by next week. So that'll be my big girl task. Oh, and I have to pay the DMV. I think I have it. Okay, I have it here. So, do my car registrations. I have that. And any big girl tasks. Could be a administrative task. It could be an emotional task, setting a boundary, declining or saying yes to an invite. So good to reflect on that. And that is our check-in. So let's begin by visiting the Codependency Dictionary. In today's class, we are going to define 4 terms: trauma, general definition of trauma; big T trauma, capital T trauma; little t trauma; and trauma, also known as chronic or complex trauma. So I have some lemon ginger. I love lemon with vitamin C by Bigelow. Not a sponsor, but gotta take care of these podcast vocal cords of mine. So let's have a little hydration water break. Everyone, if you have a beverage or some water, let's just quench our thirst, our need for hydration. Okay. Trauma. According to Google, trauma is, quote, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience, end quote. According to the American Psychological Association, also known as the APA, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event or experience, such as an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Right? So it's interesting how trauma, initially, it's a deeply distressing or disturbing experience, and the APA adds on it's the emotional response to that experience. Another definition, the Attachment Trauma Network, defines trauma as, quote, an event outside normal human experience that is generally painful, emotionally painful, physically painful, distressing, and overwhelming to a person's ability to cope, which leaves them feeling powerless. Okay, so kind of adding to, it's just outside normal human experience, and it leaves us unable to cope. We feel powerless in that situation. And lastly, at St. A and LCSW, his name is Michael Joringer, he described trauma as exposure to an event that threatens or harms our physical and emotional integrity, or of someone close to us, where we are unable to respond and experience difficulty in functioning. And so I wanted to add that because we actually can find out about, we can witness, we can hear about someone experiencing a trauma, and we can experience it vicariously. And circling back to Dr. Bruce Perry, whose quote I began this episode with, Dr. Perry, he describes trauma, how it can cause, not the definition, but the impact. So he describes how trauma can cause deep emotional scars, physical too. That's me, I'm adding physical scars. Trauma can greatly impact our brain development as children, adolescents, young adults. It can impact our personalities, our behaviors, and our outcomes in life. That is the definition of trauma. Multiple definitions for you to ponder, reflect on, what comes up, what images come to mind, what emotions, where does your mind, your body, your heart, your soul go as you hear that? And I would preface the next couple definitions with the same exploration. Next term in the Codependent Dictionary is big T trauma. Trauma with a capital T. Dr. Bruce Perry describes this as the traumatic experiences that likely come to mind for most people when we think about trauma. Typical trauma. Okay. And big T trauma is understood as any situation where one's life or bodily integrity, or someone else's life or someone else's body that's close to us, is threatened. And here are multiple examples. War, like what is happening right now in Ukraine and Russia and Yemen and other parts of the world. Natural disasters, like earthquakes, like what happened in Haiti. Man-made disasters, like stampedes, the one that happened at Astroworld in 2021, where 10 attendees of the concert died. Sexual assaults, like what Chanel Miller endured. It's a great book, by the way, by Chanel. Acts of terrorism, what happened on 9/11. Acts of violence, getting jumped, getting punched, being pushed. Child abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse perpetrated by adults, by authority figures, by others to children. The death of a loved one could be expected, it could be unexpected. Car accidents, physical trauma. So either witnessing your own injury or the injuries of others, like paramedics who are exposed to traumatic events. And also big T trauma includes witnessing any and all of the above, right? Because it's your life or someone else's life who's close to you, or even a loved one, right? Hearing about a loved one's life being hurt or dying, the way that they died, it can lead to the development of big T trauma. Some of us have had many experiences of big T trauma, while others of us have made it through our life without experiencing many big T trauma incidents. It's part of the human condition where some experience a lot, right? It's a spectrum where some have endured a lot, some not so much, but we do fall on, and being human, right? Our loved ones die. Unfortunately, countries do go to war. Unfortunately, sexual assault and rape is embedded in our patriarchal society. And so whether it's us ourselves or those close to us, trauma is and has been really a part of being human. Next definition is little t trauma. Little t trauma represents experiences and interactions that are emotionally overwhelming and that are life-altering, but not life-threatening. They often negatively impact our sense of self, And little t trauma is more subtle. It's more obscure. It's like microaggressions or the death of 1,000 paper cuts. It's the death of 1,000 little t traumas. In an interview with Brene Brown, Dr. Perry shared that you can have a loving family, but if you're continually in a school where you're feeling like you don't belong, or you're not the right race, or you're the wrong gender, or you're judged for your religion, or another aspect of your identity, you're objectified, women typically are, if you are continually in the out group, it leads to the same emotional, physical, and relational consequences as big T trauma. So again, it could potentially be, despite not having endured big T trauma, little t trauma can contribute to the manifestation of the same symptoms, consequences, and changes in your life. Some examples of little t trauma. Bullying. Bullying at home from your siblings or cousins or step siblings or whoever, right? Bullying tends to be, I would describe it as peer inflicted emotional abuse, right? So it's name calling, it's teasing, making fun of, putting down, condemning a peer. Okay, so bullying at home, at school, online. It can be at work with your coworkers, right? So just like horizontal hurt. So really from a classmate or coworker to another. Bullying. Infidelity. Could be sexual, could be emotional, being cheated on by a partner. And I would argue that it's traumatic for the partner. And if there are children, potentially it could be a little T trauma where the child feels like the parent has also been unfaithful to them, right? So maybe a mother or father is cheating on their partner, and the child also feels like they have been lied to, deceived, betrayed. Other examples of little t trauma: interpersonal conflict, witnessing an argument between your parents, being the recipient of someone's anger or aggression in your home, at school, at work. Emotional abuse, so your parent, partner, or friend insulting you. I remember I sense this would fall into the emotional abuse category. I went over to my neighbors with my twin. We were little, and we were playing with her. And her dad, he lost his shit because he thought one of us had cut the tag on the couch. Couches, I don't know if they still do, but it's like, don't remove this tag. And I don't think we cut it. I don't know how it fell off or what happened. Maybe we were playing with the cushions and he lost it. I still remember that to this day. It was scary. It was terrifying. Wasn't life-threatening, but life-altering. Yeah. I don't think I was eager to go over to her house anytime again soon. So, emotional abuse. Divorce and separation. From your parents or a beloved couple, divorcing or separating, experiencing legal troubles. So being sued, or also I would say legal administrative troubles in school. So being expelled, being suspended, getting in trouble with authority. Financial troubles, being broke, being robbed, your identity being stolen for financial gain. Other examples being coerced, pressured into unwanted sexual experiences. So a guy coming onto you in an inappropriate manner, maybe it's an inappropriate relationship, or waking up after a blackout and wondering what the fuck happened last night. Other examples, loss of a job or a position, getting fired or kicked out, kicked off of something, some role that you're in. Property damage, your car or your home being broken into, going through puberty. That was pretty life altering, and I was not ready for the male gaze that came with it. I wonder if you were. Other examples, a parent or a loved one having a mental, emotional, or substance use disorder, and the ripple effect that that can have on your family. Loss of a loved one, expected or unexpected. It can lead to little t trauma, especially if you witness it. I know I had a former patient, and she and her family, they were taking care of her grandmother at home. They knew that the end was near. And when that moment happened, it was very traumatic for her. She had these memories of certain sounds and smells and this visceral sense in the room. And it had left her traumatized, even though they were expecting it, even though they were all together, even though we're all preparing for this, right? You want to die in your home surrounded by loved ones. And yet for this patient, it had caused an emotional wound. Other examples of little t trauma, the death of a pet, expected or unexpected, rejection by friends or a partner, being dumped, medical or dental procedures that are botched or hurtful, harmful, right? Can lead to medical trauma, dental trauma. So these are just some examples of little t trauma. In my research and preparation for this episode, many of the lists with examples included a line with something like, and just about everything else. Because, and I sense it says that not to minimize what little t trauma means, but to maximize and highlight that if an experience leaves you overwhelmed, your life is altered, and you have an emotional wound as a consequence, that is your little t trauma. I've experienced multiple waves of rejection from friends. I'm going to expand on that with an anecdote, but I do remember in high school, my twin and I, we were kicked out of the popular group. And I sense externally, I seemed like I coped with it well and didn't give a fuck. And my twin, she actually had mentioned to my dad wanting to change schools. And so here she is wanting to transfer. Here I am seemingly okay, but it was traumatic. It was very, oh God, I just remember one time she and I were sitting with all of them at lunch, and one by one, they all got up. They all left. And it was just her and I, like, how was your math test? And we didn't say, yeah, I don't remember us really like being conscious of what was happening and what it all meant. But yeah, in a moment of sadness, my twin had asked, can we change schools? So little T trauma impacts everyone differently. And the immediate and long-term symptoms, consequences of it are different for everyone too. Little T trauma, it's subtle, it's obscure, it's sneaky, it's cute. It's like, oh, look at this cute little trauma. Ain't no thing. That's not a big deal. I remember my car got broken into a couple years ago, and I felt so violated. I really did, like physically. I just wanted to cover up. It was my car, I wasn't even there. So Dr. Perry, in his work, he has observed how if prolonged enough, small T trauma can activate a stress response that leads to the very same changes in the brain as big T trauma. And also, we can have single incidents of little T trauma, but if they happen over and over again, they really do start to fall on, this is the trauma spectrum. Okay, so we got big T over here, we got little t in the middle, and then we have chronic trauma, complex trauma on the other end. And you can have single incidents of big T trauma, of little t trauma. But if you are bullied over and over, if you experience emotional abuse, if there's constant interpersonal conflict, if you're coerced by a partner to have unwanted sexual experiences over and over, then it slowly, gradually shifts into the next category, to trauma, also known as C trauma, for complex or chronic trauma. This is defined by a resource, Psych Central, as, quote, a series of traumatic events that take place over a long period of time, like weeks or months or years or decades or a lifetime. We can experience trauma. Examples include many of the big T and little t trauma I've already discussed, with the added description of repeated, ongoing, multiple, long-term exposure, things like that. Okay, so let me describe some examples. So repeated incidents of physical abuse, sexual abuse, incest. I found that authorities estimate incest occurs in over 10% of American families. 10%. 10%. Other examples of C trauma: ongoing emotional, psychological, spiritual, or other abuse. And it could be from parents, siblings, authority figures, being in a relationship that has domestic violence in it. Medical abuse, right? So it's not just a medical trauma, but it's medical abuse. So inappropriate touching at every appointment. Multiple deployments for active duty members. Multiple traumatic deaths and experiences for EMTs, for paramedics, for police, firefighters. Other examples of C trauma that you might not, well, also living in a war zone, right? So being in a war, living in a war zone, living in an unsafe neighborhood, lacking physical safety in your community can contribute to the development of complex trauma. Also, forms of oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, classism, anti-Semitism, goes on and on. Poverty, so the chronic inability to provide for yourself and your loved ones. And I did find this was interesting, parentification, being the pseudo wife, husband, mother, or father in your family can contribute to the development of chronic trauma, right? So really like the deprivation, the neglect of a childhood, the overwhelming assignment role of being a parent, of being a spouse in your family. And lastly, witnessing, observing, or being aware of any of the above in your environment. So it might not have to happen to you where you have a sibling who's being abused, or you are the white partner to a woman of color and hear about, witness, observe what she has to endure, right? Long-term, chronic, complex trauma tends to have chronic and complex outcomes. So why is it important for you to reflect on your past trauma and be curious about how it's impacted you? How it impacts you in the past, in the present, in the future. Why? Why is that important? Why can't we just move on, right? It happened. Like who gives an F? Let's just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, wipe our hands, and move on. Forget about it. I sense if that was possible, we would be doing it. I sense that a lot of my therapy patients, and even in my own experiences, I have tried to forget about, move on, and let the past be the past. But I just end up continuing to engage in numbing behaviors, self-destructive patterns at times. I push people away and have moments where I feel powerless and helpless and hopeless. So I don't think that moving on is as simple as that. In fact, in some psychotherapeutic theories that I have been trained in, They suggest that after having a traumatic experience, we often come to a unconscious, sometimes it's conscious, but usually it's unconscious, conclusion about ourselves, others, and the world. That is self-protective in the moment, but self-destructive long-term. For example, if I have an experience where I am rejected by a group of girls, I may conclude about myself that I'm unwanted. Nobody wants me. With that conclusion about myself operating at a deep, unconscious level, I then have a variety of options on how to prevent feeling that rejection, that pain, that emotional wound ever again. On one end, I can reject others. Fuck those bitches. Nobody wants to hang out with them anyways. And I can isolate, withdraw, and judge others harshly to not be hurt or rejected again. I'm unwanted. I'm not unwanted. I don't want anybody. I don't. And on the other end, I can do my utmost to be wanted. I can contort myself. I can adapt. I can become a social chameleon to have others want me around. Oh my God, Marissa, you're hilarious. You're so funny. You're so nice. You're so helpful. Let's hang out all the time. I want you. Or I could land somewhere in between those two extremes. Thanks to my budding codependency, whose branches, this is my fancy metaphor, right? So my codependency is growing, taking root in my life. And those branches intertwine with my big T, little t, and to traumatic conclusions about myself, others, and the world. So I tended to lean towards the extreme of doing my utmost to be wanted. My hypothesis is that you have done something similar. As you were developing into a young woman who prioritized the thoughts, feelings, and needs of others above her own in an unconscious attempt to fulfill her own thoughts, feelings, and needs, you had some traumatic experiences on the way that led you to believe you were unwanted, unsafe, to blame, a burden, and alone, as well as other ones, but those are some core codependent fears, beliefs, conclusions. Thus, you perceive that in order to feel safe, to feel wanted, to be seen as innocent, right? Not as like innocent as like not like contaminated, but innocent as in like not to blame, to be seen as a blessing and connected, you had to put the needs of others above your own. Right? That those conclusions from trauma have led you to engage with the world in a manner to prevent feeling that pain again. But at your core, you're haunted by this belief that you're not wanted, you're unsafe, you're to blame, you're a burden, you're alone. Others can't be trusted. You're incompetent. The world is out to get you, etc. Okay, water break, hydrate. So I'm curious what comes up for you as I share that. What thoughts come up? What questions do you have? If you have questions, let me know. This is Trauma 101. So any blanks or holes or things you're left wondering about, holla. And to conclude, here's a little T trauma story to help bolster your understanding. This memory came up. It wasn't like a vivid memory. But I feel like with my former therapist and still with I have a new therapist who I love. Yeah, really working through these times of comparing myself, right? Compare and despair, or just feeling really left out and what that's meant. So I used to be a cheerleader and a good one at that. My middle school squad, it was very competitive to be on cheer. And I did it. I got on both years and we competed. We went to tournaments, competitions, and I was part of the group. I was a popular girl and we'd have sleepovers and yeah, I think I already said that. Trips. My besties were on the team. And when we left 8th grade and went to high school, most, I think, or all of us continued, right? So we joined the Frosh Soft Squad. But it was different. We didn't compete that I recall. We just cheered at games, which was super lame. And it was a sport in middle school. And in high school, I felt like I was a prop at the football game. So we joined the team. We're on the freshman sophomore team. And it was intimidating because the varsity team had girls that were like Regina George from Mean Girls. They were popular, they were pretty, and they were powerful. And they had certain traditions that we pushed back on. We, as a freshman group, we were slightly rebellious. There were rules like we had to get there early to set up the mats. We had to get them water. We had to sit some stupid way on the bus when we went to away games, like seniority stuff. And one of my friends, I will call her Kathy, she was a freshman and she was the ringleader of us, and she pushed back. She talked crap. She refused to get the water. She didn't get to practice early to set up. And there was tension. There was tension between the seniors and Kathy and this revolt that she was starting. And for me, I sensed that I really had to navigate how to please and stay cool with Kathy, but also adhere to what the older girls wanted. And I think I did a good job at both. Like, I wouldn't get there super early, but I'd start, or I don't know. I think it was subtle, but I tried to keep them both happy. So I remember we went to cheer camp. Oh man, my lips are super dry. Let me get some chapstick. I compulsively pick my poor lips. I have to talk about that in another episode. I'm a picker. Pick. Anxiety. Trauma. So we went to cheer camp, and it was known that the older girls, the Regina Georges, did not like Kathy, and they didn't like that be pushed back. So on the last night of cheer camp, they got their revenge through a hazing ritual, which I wasn't expecting it. Maybe there were some old wives' tales about hazing, but the the year the years were broken up. So the freshmen were all together, sophomores, juniors, seniors for some circle or activity. And the freshman girls were, I say, attacked by the sophomore, junior, and senior girls. If I recollect correctly, if any of my cheer alumni want to email me a correction, that would be great. But yeah, I think we're all the freshmen, we were somehow all together, and the older girls come in and they have silly string, shaving cream, they have permanent markers, and they're just, double fisting and spraying and marking us. We're like, maybe even water. And so, the freshmen, we like stand up and we start running, and we run down the hallway, and we run around this communal space in between the dorms. It was cheer camp, so we were staying in dorms, and just, it was mayhem. And they all went for Kathy. I remember, I think they even pinned her down, and they drew a mustache, or they put blues on her forehead. They just marked her up. They put shaving cream, and yeah, she was enemy number one. So they're tagging Kathy, but it is in jest. So it is laughing. I think there is a sense of camaraderie and big sister, little sister vibe. So we're running around, hiding, screaming, whining, and everyone, all these freshmen, are getting grabbed and marked and goop in their hair. All of them. And I'm running around. I remember there was a couch in the middle of this room, and I was on one side and a senior was on the other side, and I kind of shimmied to the left, and I shimmied to the right, and I shimmied to the left, like I was in football, and I shimmied to the right, and then I ran so she couldn't grab me. She couldn't, take me down and write all over my face. But it was like she wasn't even really chasing after me. None of the seniors were chasing after me. And I have this vivid memory of all the freshman girls, which I don't know, as a freshman, sophomore team, there weren't that many of us, but I don't know, maybe like 8, 10 girls. And, Kathy, Brittany, Lizzie, Jean, Kimberly, Malika, Carol. These are all pseudonyms, but all these girls got marked up and covered in shaving cream. And I don't sense I asked the question consciously, but I was wondering, is anyone going to mark me? I stopped running and basically put myself in the middle of the mayhem in hopes that I would get marked up. And it was only for a few minutes, very like a couple intense minutes of mayhem and screaming and yelling and excitement and adrenaline when our coach, maybe she blew a whistle or, okay, you guys, like, let's all sit down together. She was in on the hazing tradition. She knew what was going to happen. And she called us to attention and had us gather for maybe a late night speech, end of cheer camp speech. Kathy was trying to catch her breath. And again, this older sister, kind of the senior girls were, rubbing her head or, just kind of rubbing her back, like, haha, like, hee hee, we got you, you little rebel. And it was affectionate. It was, even though, she was marked all over with permanent marker. So Kathy's trying to catch her breath, like, oh my God. Oh, you guys are crazy. And, Carol, she had some funny drawing on her cheek, and Liz's hair is a hot mess with silly string just knotted up and tangled in it. And I was sitting there spotless. I was completely spotless. I looked like I was a senior. I looked like I was an elder who had been hazing because no one marked me up and no one really tried. I felt so unwanted in that moment. I felt invisible, and yet I felt visibly invisible as I was the only freshman who hadn't been touched. I was embarrassed. I was like, fuck, like, could somebody, again, like I'm sure I was thinking this on some level or feeling this on some level, but also like just smiling and, like, oh man, that was crazy. Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah, I got away. Nobody got me. I'm so vast. Not. Yeah, it was embarrassing. It was like, Kathy was covered. She was covered. And nobody marked me up. Categorically, I would argue that this was a little T trauma. Like I said, I felt unwanted in the moment. It was overwhelming and disrupted my sense of self. Felt embarrassed. I remember we talked about it the next morning. We're like getting on the bus and we're like, oh my God, that was crazy. Yeah, like, I think people still had marks, even though they'd showered and soaped. So they had to look up how to wipe off permanent marker and get the smell of shaving cream out of your hair. And I had nothing to share. I had nothing to contribute. I don't recall sharing it when I got home or with my non-cheer friends. And yeah, I felt like an invisible, unwanted loser. My sense is it contributed to a growing fear of rejection and social anxiety. Also, a feeling of inferiority, like Kathy gets to be a rebel, gets all the attention. I'm an angel and invisible. I was like semi-compliant to everyone, but yeah, just nobody wanted me. And with those conclusions, I can see how in other extracurricular activities, I leaned towards compliance and being attuned to others in theater and running cross country and other social circles in hopes to be and feel wanted. So wondering what I can do to have others want me contributed to trying to perceive what their needs were, trying to meet them to fulfill my own need to be wanted. So hearing that, what experiences, big T, little t, or trauma, C trauma, you have had that you sense contribute to your way of being, where you put the needs of others above your own to fulfill your own needs. In future episodes, we will continue to explore big T, little t, and trauma, how to cope with it, how to be proactive if and when it happens. There's so many layers that we will discuss in other episodes. But for now, I want you to take time this week and reflect on trauma and its impact in your past and present. You can meditate, journal, or do a voice memo contemplating big T experiences, little t, and trauma experiences. And also reflect on what are the core beliefs, the core conclusions you came to about yourself, others, and the world. If you can name those. And then ask yourself, how are they driving your actions and inactions today? Like Dr. Perry said, and so it is with human relationships. We can both create and destroy, nurture and terrorize, traumatize and heal each other. On this podcast, in this codependent community, we are focused on helping each other heal. So I wish you a healing week. That is a wrap. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please rate, review, subscribe, and share this show. Continuing to request ratings on Spotify to get more legit on Spotify. That'd be great. Let me see. How many ratings do we have on Spotify? I think the last time I checked, we had like 12. And we have like 180 on Apple. So yeah, we got to balance that out. Podcasts, codependent, 12. Yeah. So if you guys could please rate the show, I would really appreciate it. And if you're needing more support, you can get your copy of the Confiding Codependent 30 Days of Journaling Prompts for a less codependent and more conscious you. You can download the free self-validation challenge. It's a 30-day guide to providing yourself with all the validation you seek. If you're wanting to dive deeper into your codependency one-on-one, you can email me, Marissa at codependent.com. There's also links to sign up for the newsletter and a link to support the show via a one-time secure donation on PayPal. Thank you, and I will see you next week. Bye. Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me Marissa at codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.